We're here today to talk about peak season, holiday season, Christmas season, whatever you want to call it for 2024, and how that's different this year and what you can do, the tactics you can use. So the agenda today is pretty simple. I'm going to start as briefly as I can and tell you a bit of just about myself and about the company I work for, Smarter Ecommerce, so you have some context about who you're talking to. And then we'll talk about the good, the bad, and the BFCM. Just going to have a little overview about Black Friday and some recent market developments that add some context for this year. And then we'll try to spend, maybe about 50-50 of the time between that and the time just digging into some tactics. It's not a very complicated agenda today. It's not a 20-point agenda, but there'll be a lot of interesting stuff in there, I hope. So quickly, word about us. My name is Mike. I've been, working in e-commerce for about 8 years now. And before that, I was working in the wonderful world of offline retail, but been working in a retail environment one way or the other for a long time. Now online retailers are my clients, and I'm very happy about that. It's been a wild year, mostly thanks to Temu. I've been talking to, for better or worse, been talking to a lot of newspapers and sharing my opinions there. Really, they ask about Temu, they ask about Shein, they ask about TikTok. That's just what is on everyone's mind right now, and there will be at least one Temu slide in this presentation, so rest assured. But you know. I'm a lucky guy because I get to sit here in a webinar, stand on stage, and I'm actually just kind of the face for a whole group of really smart people, and that's how I'm lucky. I'm standing on the shoulders of over 100 people, some of the smartest people I've ever worked with in my career. You can work with us too. We're just a little company in a little city in a little country, but we work with some of the top brands in the world, and that's because of the culture of expertise and the care that we bring to our work. So that's enough about us. Let's talk about what's been happening lately in e-commerce and a little bit about Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and peak season. First, it's hard to, I think it's a bit reductive to take peak season and just talk about Black Friday, but there's a reason that everybody does. And the reason that Black Friday has become kind of a shorthand for Christmas shopping. And you can see that reflected here in all these charts. I just wanted to show you one view in one place of how Black Friday is different from any other Friday in the year or any other day period in the whole year. So you can see that the volume of impressions, clicks, and conversions all boom. And even better, that's not just traffic, it's intentful traffic. The conversion rate booms too. Cost per click booms as well because there's competition for that demand, of course. But it tends to pay off because we see that it's also often pretty well performing in terms of return on ad spend, in terms of the raw kind of campaign efficiency. Whether or not it works for your business is something that you need to look at your back-end metrics. And Black Friday comes under a lot of criticism as well for kind of concentrating a lot of demand into a period of intense discounting and intense competition. The question is, does it generate more holiday purchases than there would have been otherwise? And I think it's a valid question. We also see players like Amazon trying to grab market share early. A couple of years back, they introduced their fall Prime event, a second Prime Day every year. And this year it's going to be October 8th, so be mindful of that, 8th and 9th. They do that on purpose. They put it at the beginning of the season to try, because they assume that it's a zero-sum game. They assume that there's a certain amount of holiday budgets that are open, and that by moving fast, they can get some of that budget early and not have to compete for it later. But I want to talk about this idea of budgets and how much people are willing to spend, can spend. So this is just a high-level view of consumer confidence here in Europe over the past few Q4s. Let's kind of make an assumption that 2019 was a fair baseline. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but that's where consumer confidence was at the time, a little bit above the long-term average, which is indexed at 100. And then in Q4 of 2020, it dropped, of course, due to the pandemic. And what's pretty troubling now is that with the amount of inflation that we had in 2022 and 2023, consumer confidence has been really wounded, also in Q4. So it remains to be seen exactly how consumers will be feeling and spending this Q4, hopefully back to the baseline. But in the meanwhile, we've seen that this has not always been favorably reflected in conversion rates either. Conversion rates were a bit low in 2020. What you see here, by the way, is the monthly data. That's the gray curvy line there. And then you'll see the annual average, which is the purple line. So you can see how the year developed. And in 2023, actually conversion rates were, again, even lower than in the pandemic. And that's something that, again, we're just going to have to hope that this rebounds a bit this year, that consumers are feeling better, because that's, of course, one of the main challenges to a seasonal event like this is how are consumers going to react to that? How kind of frisky are they feeling with their budgets, or how conservative? I'm just going to quickly highlight the seasonal period, or Q4, in each of those years. And, it's no surprise, we talked about it earlier, how special Black Friday is. Q4 typically sees some kind of a bump, and that was very big in like 2021. There was a really significant bump. 2021 was a banner year for e-commerce, and we've been kind of chasing the ghosts of that ever since. But I'm optimistic that we're going to have a really good quarter this year. Another thing that's making things a bit painful right now is that this chart, it works the same. You'll see the gray line is the monthly data, and the blue line is the annual average. We can see that sequentially, CPCs have been rising year after year. This is data for Germany. And actually, if you look at the numbers, they're not terrible. You'll see a lot of you'll see claims out there that, CPCs are up 60% or whatever. And I think in individual cases that can be the case, but that's sort of anecdotal. When I look at aggregate data for CPC, the developments are never that insane. And what we see if we look at this is that it broadly matches inflation. So it's gone up a lot the past few years, and inflation also went up, but you can see that they're kind of in measure with each other. So I think it's about like 16% gain, which is probably similar to the cumulative inflation in Germany. And again, if we highlight the seasonal period, once again, you see that for better or worse, Q4 is also an expensive time for cost per click. It's usually the peak per year. Here I want to show you what's been going on with Black Friday lately. The last time I presented a chart anything like this was a couple years ago, in 2022. And this is actually showing the annual, basically, this is actually a chart of Novembers for each year. So for each year there, you're seeing the November that year, how they compared, because November is always the peak month of search interest in Black Friday. No surprise. And we see that this event just grew and grew and grew in popularity until 2019. That was the peak. And it just took a massive hit in 2020. It dropped dramatically. So I think there's questions about why. I actually think that this is partly, when I think about what happened in 2020, it was, of course, temporarily the collapse of offline retail. But I think that's a big part of why we saw that. And it's actually favorable for e-commerce in a way, because I think that for Black Friday, a lot of volume permanently stayed online. You'll see these, I could have thrown this in here, but you'll see these charts showing like the e-commerce share of total retail. This chart, for example, was very popular during the pandemic because there was a massive spike as e-commerce gained a lot of share of total retail. It had been growing in a linear fashion, it spiked, and then it kind of returned to the mean afterwards. And this was a very famous chart and a very famous saying. You'd see it on LinkedIn like every week, the return to the mean and so on. But that chart that you always see is seasonally adjusted. And it's interesting to look at it, just the raw data, because you'll see that the e-commerce share of retail actually spikes every November. It spikes seasonally every year. And that share has actually, that spike has gotten bigger over time. So I think Black Friday is not dead, but I actually think a lot of it has shifted more toward e-commerce and a little bit away from offline. I promise you there'd be at least one Temu slide. This is something I feel I can't ignore. This is just too big of a trend in the last 18 months or so. This chart here shows the percentage of advertisers facing competition from a select set of 3 competitors. And I chose them because Amazon is the biggest competitor that there has ever been in Google Ads, or in Google Shopping at least. Maybe, in a specific vertical, it might be Booking.com or whatever. But Amazon across e-commerce is just by far the dominant advertiser. And Wish did this insane, crazy thing back in 2020, which was to spend just all kinds of cash and briefly match Amazon. They were as prevalent as Amazon for a brief period of time in Google Shopping, and then the whole thing collapsed because their business model was garbage, and they were just basically drop shipping at a massive scale. It was they were like drop shipping AliExpress and whatever. It was nearly a scam. But Temu achieved in an even shorter time a very, very rapid rise. And they also kind of kissed Amazon. They've shown a little bit of a retreat, as you can see there, the blue line. They've retreated a bit in recent quarters. But I don't think that they're going to collapse like Wish, not as fast at least, unless regulators cripple them. And I would expect that line to go back up again in Q4. I think they will make another big push on Google. And just to show you what Q4 looked like for Temu last year, here I'm comparing just Amazon and Temu. I've taken away Wish because they weren't really around last year. Temu was the blue line, and they were at just a massive, they're competing against 75% of advertisers at an account level. So kind of a significant competitor for 75% of advertisers, 3 out of every 4, and up to even 4 out of 5. And I've added in a little annotation here, that dotted line with the package. That's December 15th. That would be kind of your classic sort of rational cutoff date for ordering gifts, because that's the last date where you can safely bet that standard shipping is going to arrive. You might pay for expedited shipping, or if it's Amazon Prime, maybe you're going to get the package. If you're really willing to kind of live in the danger zone, theoretically, you can order as late as December 22nd. And so it makes sense that Amazon is very dominant straight through the holiday period with their advertising. But it makes no sense at all for Temu to behave that way, because they had like a 14-day shipping thing. I mean, realistically, they should have been winding down their ads for a while. Around December 8th would have probably been the safe cutoff for ordering Temu for Christmas. But they didn't do that. They actually increased their aggression in the last days of the year. So I just want to remind you that they are an incredibly aggressive advertiser. They're not a rational advertiser, and they're here. And since we're on the topic of Chinese e-commerce, I'll show you one last thing in this area before we move on to tactics. AliExpress, we mentioned them just a couple of minutes ago. Wish was drop shipping a lot of their stuff. Well, I think AliExpress has gotten a little bit of maybe sibling rivalry or jealousy from Temu. People talk a lot about the rivalry between Temu and Shein, but I think AliExpress must look and say, what might have been? Why wasn't that us? So this chart shows the amount of advertisers facing competition against them back to November of last year, peak season last year. And you can see that they were not nearly as prevalent as Temu. They were at about 8% of advertisers facing account level competition here in Europe. And in December and January, they wound down a bit, as you'd expect. But then around in March, they really turned on the advertising. March, April, they turned on the advertising a lot. And they've been keeping the level up there. And even as recently as August, they've doubled compared to where they were in Black Friday last year. So I think they're making a serious push. And it remains to be seen if in Q4, they're going to push that further. So that's just a quick overview of a few fun facts about the peak season and recent trends the last few years, how things are evolving. Now I want to move on to a bit of a tactical discussion. And I have to say, there's a million ways of going about something like this. People have been publishing Black Friday checklists for years, peak season checklist for years. That content is out there. You can read the blog posts. You can download the PDF, whatever. It's tricky to decide how to approach this because it's in some ways it's all been done before. A lot of it doesn't change. And I'm not going to talk about assets in detail because I'm not into creatives and assets to that degree. I'm not the right person to talk about that. But I chose a few things that I felt I could speak about that would be interesting for you, and I hope they'll be helpful to you. Um, this is a study that I did last year, and it's a study of conversion lag. You know, it's basically always the case that when people are clicking your ads, they might buy the same day. In fact, about 85% of them do. That's the black line at the bottom here. Others are going to take longer, 1 to 2 days, or a couple of weeks, all the way up to the length of your cookie window that we can see, and then we don't know anymore. Um, but this is something that's very interesting around Black Friday. It's sort of obvious in a way, but I think it's important to be mindful of it. If you follow that black line, let's zoom in on it for a second. You can see that about a month out from Black Friday, it drops. And I'm zoomed in here to this chart doesn't start at zero, so don't kill me on the y-axis. But if we look at that week 4 period, and then if we look at 3 weeks after Black Friday, those are kind of the low point and the high points in this effect. Where basically 4 weeks before Black Friday, people are waiting. They're not not as many of your purchases or of your revenue is going to be the same day as the click. And it's like a 10 percentage spread there between that low point and that high point. Obviously, as it gets closer to Christmas, people start clicking and buying faster. So this is an important effect because there's basically, as I mentioned earlier, Black Friday and these events are largely a concentration of existing demand. It's not necessarily that they're manufacturing new demand that wasn't there, but they're shifting where it's going to occur. And you can see that shift occurring here. So this is really important to bear in mind. A lot of people get kind of the October blues. They're saying my ads aren't working anymore. October sucks. What's going on? And a lot of it is because of this. People are waiting. It's also something you might want to present to, I don't know, your CFO, make sure they're aware of this effect. Because even if it seems rather obvious to us, it might not seem obvious to someone outside of marketing. And there's just data to show it. You can see this in your own accounts as well. I'll show you how in a sec. One last thing I wanted to say. Oh yeah, I wrote it there. Use conversion by time metrics as well, because especially if you're comparing to last year, that's going to be very unflattering 4 weeks out because it's unfair. You have a excessive amount of lag occurring. You don't know how successful your campaigns are yet. So make sure that using by time metrics to have a fair comparison. That was a super fancy chart I showed you here. Looks really cool with the gradients and stuff like that. In my opinion, I'm the one who designed it. But here's a more just straightforward view, and that's a heat map. And I like this too because in the red area, this is just, you can see the seasonal effect is rolling right through the account. And the way that you can build a chart like this or like the last one, it's pretty simple. You just need a couple of rows in your report editor. You need the week, you need the days to conversion field, and then conversion value or whatever you want to report. There's a little bit more that goes into it. I don't want to be like, I don't know if you know that meme. It's like how to draw an owl, and it says draw 2 circles and then draw the owl. But I hope that I want to show how simple it is. You only need a couple of pieces of data and you can build insights like this for yourself in Looker Studio to whatever works for you. There's even some heat mapping in the UI. So there's options, I want to encourage you to report this stuff, to check it out. Here's category competition. This is something I love to harp on because I feel that Auction Insights is still one of the least utilized reports that there is. It can be hard to use. Unfortunately, Google just removed it from Looker Studio. I don't know why. That was cool. That was one of the last connectors or places you could do something with that, but you can still work with it in Google Sheets, for example. But I wanted to show you something here, like one of my favorite things to look at, because I think a lot of people don't know you can do this. You can look at auction insights per retail category, which can be quite interesting because you can drill down to like 5 levels deep in retail categories, and you can get to pretty specific product sets and see who your competitors are there. So this is for, well, it's actually a UK beauty brand, and they're what you can see here, like this is their strength relative to Douglas, because Douglas is, of course, this massive, massive brand in or retailer in Germany, homegrown giants, huge home field advantage. And you can see in the left-hand chart, sorry, actually, I forgot to slap a label on there. The left-hand chart shows how dominant Douglas is against this advertiser in Germany, typically. And then in the right-hand chart, this is a really cool thing that happens. You can see that although, you know, this brand is trying to crack the market, it's very hard, very competitive. On Black Friday, they were able to make a big dent in that. You know, what you see changing here, just to unpack this chart, there on the horizontal axis is the overlap rate. So that's the amount of auctions where you're going head-to-head against Douglas. And it's very high. It's up to 93% in some cases. It's ridiculously high. And then on the vertical axis is the inverse outranking, which shows you how often Douglas is in a stronger position than you in the auction. And so up to the right is bad. So if you look at that left-hand chart, it's ugly. The right-hand chart is pretty ugly too, to be honest, but they made a dent. They weren't getting outranked as much. And that's the power of having smart discounts, smart promotions, and you know, absolutely a key revenue date. So that's totally a win. When you can steal revenue or steal position and against a giant like Douglas, it shows you what's possible. But I would just want to tell you, you can use these kind of reports to understand at really a deep categorical level how you're competing or who your competitors are. And it's not that complicated. You just need your standard auction insights report, which is your store display name, and then the shopping auction metrics, like impression share, for example. And you just need to then add your retail categories in there. You will want to be careful with filtering so that you're getting relevant data, because you'll actually appear in all kinds of retail categories that you don't want to be in. Like they were popping up in, I don't know, printers or whatever. It's a little scary, actually. But you want to focus on actually where your key revenue and where the clicks and impressions are actually occurring. So, you know, like they can look at this and they can see that, okay, Bath and Body gift sets, that's obviously a very important category on a gift buying occasion like Black Friday. And Douglas didn't lose a lot of ground there. So that's something maybe they can look at Douglas's promotional tactics, look at their own, and try to move the needle more next year, or this year rather. Speaking of promotions, I just want to call out the promotion review that's available in Merchant Center Next under your product analytics. I love this report. It's just a good way to remember what the heck was going on last year. When did you run promotions? And Google does a lot here to summarize the impact of that for you. So you see at the top, they've got, you know, your clicks and impressions and so on, and a period over period comparison. So here we're looking at the month of November. You can see that they ran a bunch of promotions early on in November. They ran a bunch of promotions again, of course, in the peak part of the month. But it's just a reminder of when those were run, and you can then see how what a difference that made compared to October. And it's quite a difference. But I can't show you the bottom part further because it'll get into their account specific stuff that I'm not allowed to share with you. But you can see how these promotions lifted products and also how they landed with customers, and down to like, you know, the promotion text and stuff like that. So it's a very cool tool to see like, okay, what worked last year? What didn't work? How can we do that again and improve? I highly recommend you to go in there and check it out. Also think about like taking that chart and layering it against other things like your impression share, for example. And you can have an idea like, okay, what was the impact of these promotions on other KPIs in my account. Also in Merchant Center Next, I really invite you to check out the bestseller review. This is a place where I think you can learn an awful lot because I don't know. I think people forget or don't know that it's historicized. You can go and look at Black Week last year. You can drill down to a weekly level. You can choose November 20th. Black Friday was November 24th last year. And you can see, and you can also, you know, check out all the other weeks as well. But this will show you, sadly, I had to anonymize the data here, a little lame, but it is what it is. This will help you understand at the product level and the brand level what was working. And Google also has suggested products in here that you might want to check out. It's really a great resource for just planning your Black Friday, remembering what happened last year. None of us have photographic memory. All we remember is that we were tired after Black Friday last year. And again, also you can play around if you're in multiple categories, multiple countries, play with the filters, of course. Everybody wants to know how that they can capture the most demand possible and make sure their campaigns are appropriately aggressive for a period like this. And most people, more than 80%, are running smart bidding from Google. And you'd think that Google, that their algorithm would understand what Black Friday is and handle it itself. But do not leave it to trust. Absolutely not. Forget about it. You've got to take your own action. And the question becomes, how can I do that? Is it with my budget? Is it with my ROAS target? What are these things called? Seasonality adjustments. I'm going to talk about seasonality adjustments first. These are a great tool because they're designed specifically for stuff like this. Like, you shouldn't really use them for longer than a week. They're designed for short-term use. And what's really important about them, Google knows that you made a change here and they know why. It makes it explicitly known to Google that there was an adjustment because you expected a conversion rate, and then the campaign or the bidding can consider this after you turn it off. And it should handle the cooldown properly as well. Because if you're playing games with your budget and your ROAS, you then might have to modulate that afterwards. This can help ease back into business as usual. I think the big question mark, and you've maybe read the slide by now while I'm rambling, but the big question mark is, okay, how do I set a seasonality adjustment? And I wrote all this stuff here. You can read that. But in a nutshell, you need to determine what your normal conversion rate looks like for the rest of the year. And then you need to go back and look at, how did your conversion rate look last year, the year before? Look at as much data as you have. Try to get a realistic picture, okay, of how your conversion rate differed. And then I would just say the key thing that I wrote in here about standard deviation, like there's going to be standard deviation normally in your account. That's why you want to kind of maybe find your average or median as best you can, what's your conversion rate usually looks like. And then think, okay, what's a normal amount of fluctuation from that? I think it's really a good idea to consider that normal fluctuation into the conversion adjustment that you set. So that it's really, because normally there's just noise in there. And the mean or the average won't capture that noise, but the standard deviation will. So that's my advice to you there. I mentioned ROAS, another way to modulate what's going on here. And some people have the question, like, should I turn off my ROAS targets for Black Friday, or how low should I set them? What should I do here? And I remember, it was probably like 4 years back. I think it was, it was one of the first big Q4s with smart shopping. Google had released a PDF and they were telling you to uncap your budget and remove your ROAS target. And back then I was like, this is poisonous, evil advice. That's not a good idea. Now I just see things more complicated than that. So what I did here, I looked at the whole month of November last year, and this is based on thousands and thousands of campaigns. Um, and you'll kill me that I took away the vertical axis, but I don't want to distract. I don't want this conversation to be about what is ROAS like during November? What's the right ROAS or something like that? And then someone's asking me in the Q&A, well, did you include brand traffic in there or whatever? I don't care about all that. I just want to show you how these two different populations behave compared to each other with a ROAS target in blue and without a ROAS target in black. And the crazy thing is that if you look at the overall picture here, they perform very similar to each other. It doesn't matter what that number is, they perform similar to each other. But what's different here is that there's so much volatility in the untargeted area. And that to me is the problem here. When you apply a return on ad spend target, you are ensuring a level of predictability and control. I know it's not perfect. And the more conversions you have, the better. But it's giving you a measure of control. And just as a reminder, just returning to the basics here about PMAX, let's look at this for a sec. When you're talking about standard shopping, on the left-hand side here, you would have your campaign with your budget, your ROAS target, your bid modifier, and then you'd have your ad group where you could put another bid modifier, and then you'd have like a product group where you'd actually set a bid. With Performance Max, those bottom layers are gone in a certain way, or the controls there are gone. The control only exists at the top level with the budget and the ROAS, no modifiers. So we're talking about, you know, if you're turning off that ROAS target, you're removing one of your key levers. So personally, I would keep it in place, okay, because this helps you pace what's going on in your account, and I think it's worth having it there. I'd rather see seasonality adjustments being used. Gonna go back for one sec here. No, where do I want to go? Well, let's go to the slide. You see that there's there's one other lever there, which is the budget. And if you do take away your target ROAS, then budget becomes the way that you're kind of pacing that campaign now. And the reason that there's not so much difference between those two lines back on this slide, in the big picture, is because these campaigns are being limited by budget. Like it's not going to just go down to zero ROAS or something like that, because there's the budget. There are going to be saturation effects, whether through a budget or if you're uncapped, then just through like the natural market size or who you can reach with your products. It's unlikely that you'll go really to a zero ROAS, but theoretically you could. Speaking of budget, I want to show you one more thing here. Another heat map. I love heat maps because, you know, one reason that I like to build charts and work with data is because I suck at math. I have a hard time reading data tables. They're kind of meaningless to me until I layer on that visualization, and then everything makes sense. And with a heat map, you know, it's got all that specificity of the table, and it also has the visualization that makes it make sense for me. You know, it's just the story is there for you. And like, you know, here I just arbitrarily chose a dimension just to show you what you can learn from a heat map. There's devices that dimension: computers, phones, and tablet. And like you can see, this is impression volume, by the way. You can see that there's like a morning peak on desktop around 10. It's warmed up again in the early afternoon, and then there's another evening peak. Whereas mobile kind of slowly ramps up all day and peaks pretty late at 9 p.m. And similarly, like tablet is even more concentrated and peaks a bit earlier around 7 a.m. But, you know, this is the kind of stuff that you can learn from a heat map. You can just see these differences very clearly and see the data that's behind it. So this can be your friend when it comes to budget or to budget pacing. I think that's, you know, one of the key lessons here. Look at your account and see, when do you need your budget to be alive? Because if you're burning in the morning, I'll tell you, most accounts are going to look like this with a strong late evening peak because people people wait to the last minute or they spend all day shopping or they've got better things to do. I don't know it, but you want to have that budget available. Please don't burn your budget earlier in the day. It needs to be there. And again, you can build a heat map like this very easily. Just all you need is hour of day as a row, and then you can add, whatever other dimensions or metrics that you want. Device, or you can look at any number of dimensions there. This would have made sense actually next to the promotion slide, but it is what it is. Pricing can correlate heavily with KPIs. So here I've just pulled the Google benchmark pricing data, and this is another thing that's available from Merchant Center. It used to be embedded directly in Google Ads this time last year. I hope it's coming back because for some reason they took it away. But you can link this data together. You can export your benchmark data. There's also, by the way, really great stuff you can do with BigQuery and Merchant Center. You can use that for your relative demand or your best sellers or any number of data. There's a lot of stuff that you can get through there. But at any rate, here you can see the average conversion rate for this account is 2.5%. And then in the middle there's a bar of, or actually kind of in between these bars, that's the point where you're on benchmark. There's no difference between benchmark, but it's pretty intuitive. When your price is less than the benchmark, your conversion rate increases. When your price is above the benchmark, your conversion rate decreases. So I just want to tell you, this data is available to you. You can get this out of your Merchant Center and out of your ads account. You can link them together and find out. You don't have to guess, you can know. And this can help you along looking at your historical promotion data from last year. Make smart decisions because it's a question. What is the right promotion? Am I giving too much away here? Is it worth the market share? What kind of customer am I acquiring? Is this someone who's going to just be forever buying on discount from me? That's the kind of shopper I am, by the way. We're known as cheapskates. And I think this is one of the last things I want to share with you before we go into Q&A, which looks like we're pretty much on time there. I really want to invite you to look at your tracking. I also almost presented a slide here about suck rate. I encourage you to just Google conversions, suck rate, or anti-conversions. That's another great tip because it just helps you understand where there's friction in your e-com landing pages and stuff. And because everyone measures the good stuff, no one measures the bad stuff. But another topic. Let's stay on topic here. This is a really cool little, pretty small piece of code that it's an extension to your conversion tracking. It's called Conversions with Cart Data. There's a few different ways of implementing it. Google will provide you with the example code no matter how you want to do it. Fire some test conversions, see if it's working. It's not such a big deal. It's part of our standard tracking implementation for our clients. So, I think we have like 40% now of our clients have this implemented, and it's great. And the point being here that this helps you understand what people are doing on your websites, and like when they click your ad and when they actually buy, because normally, the ad click went to product ID 123, and then you see what the order value was for that, and that's about it. But this helps you understand what kind of substitutions were made. What was clicked and what was actually bought. Did they sell into a different brand, or did they buy into a different category? Did they buy multiples? What happened? You can figure that out when you have this tracking in place, and that can help you. If you did it last year, look at last year's data. Looked at the clicked versus bought data for last year and try to understand. Otherwise, get it in place now, and you're investing in your future. I promise you that. I'll leave you with the rhetorical question here, or actually, no, excuse me, I have a slide after this. We've teased about this before. Is Black Friday worth it? Because questions come up here. Is it incremental? Am I just rebuying my customers at a discount? What is going on here? Is it even worth participating in this feeding frenzy? There is another option here for Performance Max. You'll have heard of new NCA value mode. There's two. It's a little confusing here what Google's done. They have two things: NCA value mode and NCO bidding mode. Okay, NCA value mode, I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about because I don't agree with the whole methodology. I don't like it. But basically, you decide what a new customer is worth for you, and Google will bid more aggressively toward that because it's going to inflate the order value for that person. And then this will result in a higher value per click. And in the future, Google will kind of boost people like that, and they're incentivized to bid more because the value per click prediction is higher. That's it. But it's messing up with your reporting, and I wouldn't do it. If you want to really force the issue, I would recommend NCO bidding mode, which is new customer only bidding mode. And there, Google's really just going to try to bid for new customers. The thing that you should be aware of is that these campaigns often don't perform well, which makes sense because cold traffic is harder and more expensive to acquire. And the volume is also lower, which makes sense because there's less of that traffic out there. But it could be something that you want to investigate. And you can think about what are the combinatory logics here? Do I want to exclude brand from my normal campaigns, but then I want to in parallel run a new customer campaign where I'm okay that brand is in there? There's different things that you can think of here. Do I want to target different products to those different audiences? Do I want to target different discounts to those audiences? These are the kind of things that you should strategically consider if you want to go in that direction. Yes. And that's it. That's a good landing. I want to end by 45. We're at 43. So actually there's time for questions and answers at this point. Hold on, let me just, stop sharing. Give me a second. I'm in Zoom, and sorry, this is very unprofessional of me to say, but I don't like the Zoom UI. Okay. All right, so some questions are coming in here. Thanks. First question is, do you have data from Belgium? I'm sorry, that question was asked quite a while back. I don't know which data you're referring to specifically, but you can write me on LinkedIn, for example, and I do have data for Belgium. Maybe I can help you out. I don't have time. I'm not swimming with data for Belgium, but I have some. Since the end of August, video and Google Display Network spend increased heavily in almost all PMax campaigns. Was there any update or hidden changes on Google's side? I'm trying to think about that. Nothing jumps out to me. I would say that Google has for sure been generally trying to push spend on YouTube. YouTube is really a revenue hero for them right now. I joked around this time last year that their entire ads product roadmap for 2024 is just more YouTube ads, which I think is kind of true. But okay, really quick. Something that I said about PMax in the early days, which was both really wrong and really right. I said that like PMax is not just an extension of smart shopping campaigns. It's like a new platform inside of Google Ads, and it's the future of Google Ads. And on the one hand, that's right, and we see that a lot of campaign types have migrated to Google Ads. And on the other hand, it's completely wrong because most PMax campaigns are like 90% shopping. And I can't reconcile this. But what I can tell you is that Google has a great profit margin on their owned and operated stuff, including YouTube. They have a They also have, it's kind of their walled garden in terms of data sharing, and that's very attractive to them as well. So for these reasons, they're going to try to keep increasing the share of that inventory in Performance Max. People say it's spam inventory, it's junk inventory, they want to sell it. You know what? I'm not going to get in that debate, but I think it's highly profitable for Google to do so. Anyway, regarding new customer only mode, I've noticed that my campaigns register only about 25% of new customer conversions when looking at the new customer purchase volume. Is there a reason why PMax might push to existing customers despite this setting? Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and I don't really know the answer to that. It seems like a technical question for their team. It shouldn't happen. I think, in my opinion, if they're not sure if the customer is existing or not, then they shouldn't have been shown the ad. But I can't answer that better than that. 25% seems low. You mentioned that Google should handle the downward slope after implementing seasonality adjustments. Is it still worth it to add seasonality adjustments for the ramp down period to be on the safe side? I think it doesn't hurt. I think safe is safe with Google. And all right, I'll give it a second in case any more questions come through. Not that many today, which is also fine. But if you have questions, feel free to ask them. All right. There's another one here. Are you working with predictive audiences from GA4 for Black Week? Have you been able to gain experience there? For example, tests for target group definitions. Great question. I don't personally have really touch points with that, so I can't say. But I think it's a cool feature, so I would have a look. But I don't have any experience with it, so I can't say give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Sorry about that. Someone's asking if there are more reading or watching recommendations for seasonality adjustment noobs. I actually think that the seasonality adjustment support page from Google, their normal documentation is really good and clear. I think they give you a pretty straightforward explanation of how to use it. I mean, the big question mark is really how to set the adjustment, or which specific adjustment to set. But they talk about the way that it behaves, the way you can expect it to behave. And I think it's a totally fair and good page from them. Great. I think that about wraps it up. So I want to thank everyone who attended today. And yeah, feel free to reach out. And I'm wishing you a really successful Q4, not just Black Friday, but the whole quarter.